I still remember the day I received an cryptic message from an acquaintance, inviting me to explore the long-abandoned Unit 522 in Edinburgh Manor. The email was brief, but the words, "You're the only one who can help us," lingered in my mind like a whispered secret. It wasn't until I arrived at the manor, however, that I realized I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The once grand building now stood as a testament to decay and neglect, its stone facade covered in ivy and moss. The entrance, once a proud archway, hung crookedly on its hinges like a macabre grin. As I stepped inside, the air clung to me like a damp shroud, heavy with the scent of rot and dust. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, my eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway for any sign of life. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the creaking of old wooden floorboards beneath my feet. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a flyer tacked to the wall, an invitation to a ceremony, promising unlocking the secrets of Atlantis, that I realized I had indeed taken the bait. The words seemed innocent enough, but something about them resonated with me on a primal level, drawing me deeper into this strange and foreboding world. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I turned to leave, but it was too late. The group had already assembled in the main hall, their faces aglow with an otherworldly intensity. They welcomed me with open arms, their eyes gleaming with an unsettling fervor. And in that moment, I knew I was in over my head. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of chanting, drumming, and what felt like hours of incantation. I couldn't understand the words, but the cadence was hypnotic, drawing me into a realm beyond reason or sanity. As the night wore on, the air grew colder, the shadows deepening into dark, malevolent entities that seemed to writhe upon the walls. I stumbled out of the hall, gasping for air, my mind reeling with questions and doubts. But as I looked around at the faces of those who had welcomed me so warmly just hours before, I realized I was no longer alone. They were watching me, their eyes burning with an unblinking intensity that made my skin crawl. I knew then, in that moment of stark realization, that I had to get out. But as I turned to flee, I felt a hand on my shoulder, spinning me back around to face the darkness that lurked within Unit 522's depths. As the night wore on, the air grew colder, the shadows deepening into dark, malevolent entities that seemed to writhe upon the walls. I felt a presence stirring, as if the very fabric of reality was awakening from a centuries-long slumber. The group's leader, a woman with piercing green eyes and skin as pale as alabaster, began to chant in a language that sounded like the rustling of dry leaves. Her voice was low and hypnotic, drawing me deeper into the ritual. I felt my mind expanding, as if it was being stretched to its limits, trying to comprehend the eldritch horrors that lurked beyond the veil of sanity. The others seemed entranced, their eyes rolled back in their heads as they surrendered to the power of the ceremony. I tried to resist, but my feet felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. I heard a low growl like thunder on a summer's day, and the air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. The woman's voice rose to a crescendo, her words pouring forth like a river of madness. "The gates are open," she screamed, her eyes blazing with an unnatural light. "Let the devourer in." I felt a presence coalescing before me, a darkness that seemed to have a life of its own. It was then that I saw it, a figure twisted and elongated, its skin like dark glass and its eyes burning with an inner fire. The creature's gaze locked onto mine, and I felt my mind shattering like fragile glass. I tried to scream, but my voice was lost in the cacophony of sound that filled the room. The last thing I remembered was the feeling of being pulled towards that creature, as if it was drawing me into some abyssal void from which there was no return. As the days passed, I began to notice strange occurrences around Edinburgh Manor. At first, they were small things, a door creaking open by itself, the sound of whispers in the night, or the faint scent of incense carried on the wind. I dismissed it as mere coincidence, but deep down, I knew that something was amiss. The group's leader, Rachel, seemed to be growing more and more agitated, her eyes sunken and her skin pale. She would often disappear for hours at a time, only to return with an unnerving smile on her face. I started to wonder if she was behind the strange happenings, but whenever I confronted her, she would brush it off as mere paranoia. It wasn't until I stumbled upon one of Rachel's journals that I realized the true extent of what was happening. The entries were cryptic, but they spoke of an ancient power stirring, a presence that had lain dormant for centuries. "The devourer is awakening," she wrote, her handwriting trembling with fear. "We must prepare." I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words, knowing that I had stumbled upon something much bigger than myself. The group's rituals became more frequent and intense, their chanting growing louder and more urgent. I watched in horror as they summoned entities from beyond our world, entities that seemed to feed on fear and madness. And then there were the dreams, dark, twisted visions that left me gasping for breath. In them, I saw myself trapped in a labyrinth of mirrors, with no escape from the reflections that haunted me. The more I tried to resist, the more they seemed to seep into my waking life. I knew then that I had to get out, but it was too late. The presence had already taken hold, its grip on me like a vice. And as I looked around at the group, I saw that they were all starting to change. Their eyes grew darker, their skin paler, and their smiles twisted into grotesque grins. They were no longer human, but vessels for something ancient and malevolent. The devourer had awakened, and we were all just pawns in its game of terror. As the days passed, I began to notice strange occurrences around Edinburgh Manor. At first, they were small things, a door creaking open by itself, the sound of whispers in the night, or the faint scent of incense carried on the wind. I dismissed it as mere coincidence, but deep down, I knew that something was amiss. The group's leader, Rachel, seemed to be growing more and more agitated, her eyes sunken and her skin pale. She would often disappear for hours at a time, only to return with an unnerving smile on her face. I started to wonder if she was behind the strange happenings, but whenever I confronted her, she would brush it off as mere paranoia. It wasn't until I stumbled upon one of Rachel's journals that I realized the true extent of what was happening. The entries were cryptic, but they spoke of an ancient power stirring, a presence that had lain dormant for centuries. "The devourer is awakening," she wrote, her handwriting trembling with fear. "We must prepare." I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words, knowing that I had stumbled upon something much bigger than myself. The group's rituals became more frequent and intense, their chanting growing louder and more urgent. I watched in horror as they summoned entities from beyond our world, entities that seemed to feed on fear and madness. And then there were the dreams, dark, twisted visions that left me gasping for breath. In them, I saw myself trapped in a labyrinth of mirrors, with no escape from the reflections that haunted me. The more I tried to resist, the more they seemed to seep into my waking life. I knew then that I had to get out, but it was too late. The presence had already taken hold, its grip on me like a vice. And as I looked around at the group, I saw that they were all starting to change. Their eyes grew darker, their skin paler, and their smiles twisted into grotesque grins. They were no longer human, but vessels for something ancient and malevolent. The devourer had awakened, and we were all just pawns in its game of terror. As the days turned into weeks, the group's behavior became more erratic. Rachel would lash out at us for no reason, her anger and frustration growing with each passing day. The others seemed to be succumbing to some kind of mass madness, their minds shattered by the eldritch horrors that lurked beyond our world. I tried to hold on to my sanity, but it was slipping away from me. I began to see things that couldn't be explained, ghostly apparitions in the corner of my eye, disembodied voices whispering in my ear. The group's rituals became more and more intense, their chanting growing louder and more urgent. I knew then that we were all doomed. The devourer had awakened, and it would never let us go. The world around me had begun to distort and writhe like a living thing. Colors bled together, shapes blurred, and sounds twisted into cacophonous screams. I stumbled through the group's rituals, my mind shattered by the eldritch horrors that lurked beyond our world. Rachel's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, her voice dripping with honey as she chanted incantations that seemed to unlock doors to realms of madness. The others were no longer human but twisted, nightmarish versions of themselves. They capered and danced around me, their laughter echoing through the halls like a chorus of the damned. I tried to resist, but my feet felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. The devourer's presence loomed over us, its cold breath washing over me like a wave of despair. I saw visions of ancient civilizations, of cities consumed by darkness and madness. I saw creatures that defied explanation, twisted monstrosities with bodies made of shadow and eyes that burned with an inner fire. The world around me was unraveling, thread by thread, until nothing remained but a tapestry of madness and terror. And yet, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I was watching myself from outside my body. I saw Rachel's face twist into a grotesque grin, her eyes flashing with an otherworldly energy. She reached out a hand, beckoning me to join the dance. I tried to resist, but my legs moved of their own accord, drawn to the rhythm of the ritual like a moth to flame. The others closed in around us, their twisted forms blurring together as they formed a circle of darkness. The chanting grew louder, the incantations pouring forth like a river of madness. I felt myself being pulled into the vortex, sucked down into a world of pure chaos and terror. And then, everything went black. I awoke to an unfamiliar world. The group's rituals had stopped, and the manor was silent. Rachel was nowhere to be found, but her journal lay open on my chest. The pages were filled with cryptic notes, written in haste as if she had been trying to convey a message before everything went black. I stumbled through the halls, searching for answers. Every door led to more questions. The other group members were gone, their bodies cold and stiff like puppets left out to dry. I found no sign of Rachel, but her scent lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of what had transpired. As I searched, strange events began to occur. Doors slammed shut on their own, and shadows moved of their own accord. I heard whispers in the darkness, voices that seemed to come from all directions at once. The line between reality and madness was blurring, and I felt myself teetering on the edge. I stumbled upon a hidden room deep in the manor's basement. Inside, I found a series of ancient artifacts, each one more twisted than the last. There were ritual knives with blades that seemed to shift and writhe like living things, and candles that burned with an otherworldly flame. In the center of the room, I found a large, leather-bound book. Its pages were filled with strange symbols, etched into the paper in a language I couldn't understand. As I touched the cover, the world around me seemed to tilt and spin. The symbols began to glow, pulsing with an energy that seemed to sear itself into my brain. I felt myself being drawn into the book, sucked down into a world of ancient knowledge and forbidden power. And then, Everything went black once more. I was trapped in a world of ancient knowledge and forbidden power. The symbols from the leather-bound book danced before my eyes, weaving a spell of confusion and disorientation. I stumbled through the pages, trying to make sense of the arcane language, but it seemed to shift and change before me. As I delved deeper into the text, I began to feel a strange connection to the ancient civilization that had created this knowledge. The Atlanteans, a people said to be lost to the sands of time, seemed to be speaking to me through the pages. Their secrets were revealed to me in flashes of insight, and I felt myself being drawn into their world. I saw visions of a great city, its spires and towers piercing the sky like shards of glass. The Atlanteans were said to possess knowledge of the universe, to have unlocked the secrets of creation itself. And now, it seemed, that knowledge was mine to command. As I read on, the symbols began to coalesce into a single message, etched across the page in bold, crimson letters. The key lies with the oracles. I had heard of the oracles before, ancient beings said to possess the power of prophecy and foresight. They were said to be hidden away, their locations lost to the ages. But now, it seemed, they held the key to unlocking the secrets of the Atlantean civilization. I felt a surge of excitement and trepidation as I realized that my journey was far from over. The line between reality and madness was still blurred, but I knew that I had to press on, no matter where the journey took me. I was determined to find the oracles, no matter where they were hidden. I scoured the pages of the ancient text, searching for any clues that might lead me to them. And then I found it, a single sentence, tucked away in a corner of the book. The oracle's temple lies beneath the waves, guarded by the remnants of a long-forgotten city. I knew at once what this meant. The temple was said to be hidden beneath the ocean, its entrance sealed away by a powerful curse. But I was undeterred. I set out on a perilous journey, navigating treacherous underwater caverns and avoiding deadly sea creatures. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw it, the entrance to the oracle's temple, guarded by a pair of massive stone statues. They were covered in seaweed and coral, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly energy. I knew at once that I was not alone. The statues seemed to be watching me, waiting for me to make my move. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, the water swirling around my ankles like a living thing. As I entered the temple, I felt a sense of trepidation wash over me. Something was waiting for me inside, something that didn't want me there. But I pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets of the oracles. The air was thick with the scent of incense and something else, something sweet and decaying. I could feel eyes upon me, boring into my skin like hot coals. And then I saw her, a figure shrouded in shadows, standing at the far end of the temple. She beckoned to me, her voice like a siren's call. "Welcome, seeker of knowledge," she said. "I have been waiting for you." I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure emerged from the shadows, its features becoming clearer with each passing moment. It was Rachel, or at least it looked like her. Her eyes gleamed with an otherworldly energy, and her smile seemed to stretch across her face like a grotesque parody of her former self. "I've been waiting for you," she repeated, her voice dripping with malice. "You're just in time to join the investigation." I felt a shiver run down my spine as she beckoned me deeper into the temple. The air seemed to grow colder, the shadows twisting and writhing like living things. I tried to step back, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. Rachel began to move closer, her eyes fixed on mine with an unnerving intensity. "We're going to uncover the secrets of the oracles," she hissed, her breath cold against my skin. "And you're going to help me do it." I tried to resist, but it was too late. Rachel's grip closed around my wrist like a vice, and I felt myself being pulled towards her with an otherworldly force. The world around me began to distort and writhe, like a painting smeared by a madman's brush. I felt my sanity fracturing, piece by piece, as the darkness closed in around me. I was trapped in a living nightmare with no escape from the clutches of the possessed Rachel. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor of the temple, my head throbbing with pain. Rachel stood over me, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "The investigation is complete," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "And you're a part of it now." I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over me, forcing me back onto the floor. As I looked up at Rachel, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Her eyes had changed. They were no longer human, but rather two glowing orbs of pure malevolence. And in that moment, I knew that I was doomed. I stared up at Rachel's face, my mind reeling with horror. Her eyes had changed, and I knew that she was no longer human. But it wasn't just her eyes that had changed. Everything about her seemed different, twisted somehow. She reached out a hand to me, her fingers stretching like claws in the dim light of the temple. "Join us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Join the unseen forces that drive us all." I tried to scramble away, but my body felt heavy, as if weighted down by an invisible force. Rachel's eyes seemed to bore into mine, drawing me back in with an otherworldly power. I felt my sanity fraying at the edges, threads of reality snapping loose like threads from a torn seam. The world around me began to distort and writhe, like a painting smeared by a madman's brush. Colors bled together, shapes merged into others, and the air seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy. I felt myself being pulled towards Rachel, drawn into a vortex of madness that threatened to consume me whole. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The world snapped back into focus, and I was left staring up at Rachel's face, my heart pounding in my chest. But something was different. Something was off. Rachel's eyes seemed different, not quite human anymore. She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay," she said. "You're one of us now." I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. My mind reeled with the implications. What did she mean? What had happened to me? And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went black. I slowly came to, my head throbbing with pain. I was lying on a cold stone floor, surrounded by candles that cast eerie shadows on the walls. Rachel stood over me, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly energy. "It's time," she said, her voice dripping with anticipation. "The final preparation has begun." I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over me, forcing me back onto the floor. Rachel reached out and helped me to my feet, her grip like ice. "We must be ready," she said, her eyes burning with an inner fire. "The ritual is near." She led me through winding corridors and dark, deserted chambers, until we finally arrived at a vast, cavernous space filled with rows of ancient stone statues. The air was thick with incense and the scent of decay. "This is where it begins," Rachel said, her voice echoing off the walls. "Here, we will unlock the secrets of the unseen forces." She reached out and took my hand, her grip like a vice. "Come," she said, leading me towards the center of the room. There, on a pedestal of black stone, lay a small, ornate box. The box was adorned with strange symbols and markings that seemed to shift and writhe in the flickering candlelight. "This is it," Rachel said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "The key to unlocking our true potential." She opened the box, revealing a dark, swirling vortex inside. "Step through," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "and you will be reborn." As I stepped through the portal, everything around me dissolved into chaos. The candles flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. The air was filled with an otherworldly howl, like the wailing of the damned. And then, in an instant, it was over. I found myself standing at the edge of a vast, frozen wasteland. The sky above was a deep, foreboding gray, and the ground beneath my feet was slick with ice. Rachel stood beside me, her eyes blazing with an eternal fire. "You are one of us now," she said, her voice carrying on the wind. "You will never be free." And with that, she reached out and grasped my hand, drawing me into the frozen landscape. We walked for what felt like hours, the only sound the crunch of ice beneath our feet. The air was cold and unforgiving, but I felt no chill, no fear, only a sense of acceptance, of resignation. For I knew that I had crossed a threshold, that there was no turning back. And as we walked, the landscape around us began to change. The snow grew deeper, the ice more treacherous. We climbed higher and higher until finally we reached a great frozen mountain peak. There at the summit stood an ancient statue of a long-forgotten king. His eyes were black as coal, his skin pale as the moon, and on his lips a single word was etched in blood: eternal. Rachel turned to me, her eyes blazing with triumph. "You are mine now," she said, "forever." And with that, everything went white.